Americans are starting to feel the pinch as the nation is confronted by multiple economic crises, including rising inflation and an ongoing bottleneck in the supply chain. So the White House presented a serious plan to right the metaphorical ship here, right? Nah. But they do have a message for the American people. Stop whining. Lower your expectations. Friends, it is time for Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. It's not exactly what you thought it'd be if you voted for Biden, is it? Country feels like it's just stumbling along. The economy's sputtering a little bit. Things aren't really growing and building back better the way we were told, right? We're all aware of this. You can see it. You can almost feel it out there. And the Democrats are running scared from some of this reality, from the recognition, particularly among independents who, when it comes to their support in the polls, are fleeing the Biden administration in droves. So how best to handle this? One might think that in a republic like our own, when the leadership gets the sense that the people are disaffected in large enough numbers that it could affect the political future of those in office, they would change course, they would have an action plan. There's maybe some of that going on somewhere, but really what they're hoping is that they can just rely, the Biden White House can rely on their lapdog media to do the hard work for them and just convince the American people, be quiet. It's not that big a deal. It's not that bad. Here's a Washington Post headline. This was amazing. Don't rant about short-staffed stores and supply chain woes. Try to lower your expectations. And this is one of these editorials. I know it's just one person writing a editorial of the Washington Post, but let's understand the Post decided to print this because at some level it represents what they believe people need to read and think today. And there are certainly a lot of Democrats out there who are struggling for some kind of a narrative to make it seem like the Biden administration is not a calamity. And so what are they telling people? Stop having such high expectations, right? This is from the piece. American consumers, their expectations are pampered and catered to for decades. They're not accustomed to inconvenience. Customers' persistent whine, why don't they just hire more people? Sounds feeble in this era of the Great Resignation, especially in industries such as food service, with reputations for being tough places to work. Rather than living constantly on the verge of throwing a fit and risking taking it out on overwhelmed servers, struggling shop owners or late arriving delivery people, we do ourselves a favor by consciously lowering expectations. Yeah, she's just basically saying, look, everybody, yeah, the Biden administration is going to make everything more expensive, slower, more frustrating, less efficient, lots of problems, lots of things that you don't like. So instead of being annoyed by this, do yourself a favor. Just accept that. Lower your expectations. Build back better, please. That was then. Now it's stop complaining about how crappy we are at running the country. That's exactly what they want to be telling people now, isn't it? It's amazing that this is what they're saying, but here we are. And it's not just this editorial. I mean, here is tone-deaf PSAKI bomb over at the White House, where she is press secretary, making a joke about the supply chain crisis.
It was clear in March of 2020, when COVID hit, that the supply chains across the world had been disrupted. Even as the sort of work to fight back against COVID proceeded, it was crystal clear that things were not improving on supply chain. People couldn't get dishwashers and furniture and treadmills delivered on time, not to mention all sorts of other things. So why is it
the tragedy of the treadmill that's delayed?
Right, the treadmill.
The tragedy of the treadmill. First of all, Jen, let's be honest. With you, it's a Peloton. All right, you're fancy. Second of all, well, when people go into the store and they want to buy things that aren't there, they're frustrated because they've worked to accrue the capital to have the money in the bank to buy things that they need or want. And when it's not there, because you have supply chain snarls, and this is driven in part by government policy and ineptitude at the ports, not taking proactive steps to unload shipping fast enough so that it can get to the stores, as well as inflation rising and the general environment that we've seen now created by the Democrats, where because of COVID fear, people aren't showing up for work, and so you have a lot of jobs that are going unfilled. This is all bad, but once again, there are some who are telling you, stop whining, don't complain, this is the best it's going to get. And there are others like Pete Buttigieg out there. Remember, he was the absentee Secretary of Transportation for a couple of months because he was on parental leave. But here's Pete Buttigieg spinning the crisis, saying, oh no, it's because people are buying so much stuff and things are great.
Well, certainly a lot of the challenges that we've been experiencing this year will continue into next year, but there are both short-term and long-term steps that we can take to do something about it. Look, part of what's happening isn't just the supply side, it's the demand side. Demand is off the charts. Retail sales are through the roof. And if you think about those images of ships, for example, waiting at anchor on the West Coast, every one of those ships is full of record amounts of goods that Americans are buying because demand is up, because income is up, because the president has successfully guided this economy out of the teeth of a terrifying recession.
Yes, that's what it is. The president has done a great job steering us out of the recession. Joe Biden, that guy's an economic genius. He really knows what he's doing. If you want to get a sense of how disconnected from reality this White House, this Democrat regime that's in charge really is, well, there are a lot of ways you could go about it. There are a lot of things you could see that would certainly open a window to the absurdity of all of this. But one is just this notion of the Build Back Better agenda. I mean, this is what they're calling the Biden plan, which is effectively to raise taxes and regulations and spend a whole lot of money on social programs, social welfare programs, and climate change stuff, other absurdities out there. Jen Psaki is still sticking to this talking point that when you spend $3.5 trillion of additional money, it actually costs nothing.
The president still believes that Build Back Better will not add a dime to the national debt.
Correct, it won't.
Why should Americans believe that?
Because it won't. Go ahead.
What if taxes that he says he wants to, get more taxes in? What if it doesn't happen? What if the economy goes sour? Lots of things can happen. What you're going to tell from up there, future generations, not even born yet, that they're not on the hook for this. Is that right?
That's right, and hopefully you'll report accurate information yourself.
Really? That's where we are? Just getting snarky with people because they have a hard time believing that the government's going to spend an additional $3.5 trillion, that it will somehow not add a penny to the national debt? Anyone really believe that? Unless they're going to put ruinously high taxes on a lot of businesses and individuals, that's obviously not true. And even if they do that, it's not going to end up being true either. And let's just remember, there are some things that, as much as they want to hide from it, they want to pretend something else is going on, they can't. Like Jen Psaki letting everybody know they are continuing to press OPEC to pump more oil.
We are continuing to press through member countries of OPEC, even as we are not a member, to address the supply issue and work to address it here as well. I would also note that what we're also working to address is more of a logistics issue of how we are moving supply around the country, which means there are shortages in some places and not others, and that's something that we are also working to address. We are certainly well aware of the impact on any increase in gasoline prices or any cost on the American people, and we're going to continue to use every lever at our disposal.
Yeah. Let's see what the results look like. So far, not so good. The Department of Justice is putting parents on notice that their vocal opposition to critical race theory in children's schools, their kids' schools, could constitute an act of domestic terrorism? What? Ohio U.S. Senate Candidate JD Vance is accusing the DOJ of weaponizing the government against parents and is calling for the resignation of Attorney General Merrick Garland. Vance will join us after the break to give his perspective. But let's take a moment to speak about one of our newest sponsors here on Hold the Line, Fume. Fume is the #1 natural way to quit smoking and vaping. Fume is all about creating positive habits, and here's how simple they make it. Fume created a natural inhaler that allows your body to receive the amazing benefits from some of the world's best super plants. It's a Canadian-made, handcrafted wooden inhaler with no electronics. It makes quitting smoking easier. There's no smoke, no vape, no nicotine, and no harmful chemicals. Fume naturally helps with that pesky hand-to-mouth habit and reduces those nicotine and menthol cravings. And their flavors actually taste great. You need to check them out. This company is incredible. Fume also has other areas of support beyond just helping you to quit smoking. Go to breathefume, spelled FUM.com/buck, and take their quiz to find out which super plants are best for you. It's quick, easy, and will point you to specific plants and the research behind them for their benefits. When you use code BUCK at checkout, you'll get 10% off. Breathe in the benefits of the world's super plants today. Don't wait. It's time to quit smoking or vaping. Go to breathefum.com/buck. That's breathefume.com/buck. Ohio Senate Candidate JD Vance is going to join us when we come back. The nation faces crime and murder in major cities, a rising inflation rate, and a supply chain crisis that threatens to spoil the holiday season. So what's the Biden administration focused on? Parents protesting critical race theory at school board meetings, of course. Ohio Senate Candidate JD Vance has been critical of the Attorney General and the DOJ's targeting of parents. He tweeted out, "Garland is quite clearly trying to chill free speech and silence dissent on behalf of the Democrat Party. His attempt to weaponize the federal government to target Joe Biden's political enemies must not be tolerated. Garland should immediately resign." Joining me now, Ohio candidate for the U.S. Senate and author of Hillbilly Elegy, JD Vance. JD, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
What's going on here? When you have the top law enforcement officer in the United States federal government putting out a memo that seems to be nice, free speech, you got parents, be ashamed if something happened to it, courtesy of the FBI. A lot of people view that as very concerning, and it seems that this issue is not going away anytime soon. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Attorney General Garland is basically weaponizing the people's government against them. And, you know, one of the things our founding fathers really liked about this country is that we really cared about self-government. We really cared about participating in the government of our local communities. And that's the sort of thing that Garland is basically turning the Attorney General or turning the FBI against. He's saying, if you dare show up at these school board meetings, if you dare protest the conditions of your own community, we're going to come after you. And that is necessarily going to have a silencing effect on people's speech. It's going to make people terrified to go and speak their mind, which is one of the great things about American democracy, is that we have parents willing to go and fight for their kids and fight for the interests of their children. I think it's really disgusting stuff, and I think it's really unprecedented. A lot of what Joe Biden has done is bad. A lot of it's a disaster. I think using the FBI like this against parents is really unprecedented. That's why I suggested he should resign.
I mean, the left, much to what the liberal media and politicians have to say, are all backing up this notion that critical race theory isn't an issue. I want to play you a montage of Democrats who make this claim that there is no CRT. It doesn't exist in schools.
Violent looking, angry, spewing parents outside of these schools.
Individuals intent on creating chaos for the sake of creating chaos.
These actions could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism.
This becomes a security crisis in a sense for the nation.
This may also mobilize even more law enforcement to be at these meetings.
It is dangerous to our children when the parents themselves are the school bullies.
I think one of the worst things is the actions at the board meetings. The calling of names. Tyrant, Marxist, communist.
We've never seen anything like we're seeing at these school boards now.
Well, what are they seeing at the school board meetings, JD?
Well, of course, if you put on a BLM shirt and throw a Molotov cocktail at a federal courthouse, you're not a domestic terrorist. What does make you a domestic terrorist, of course, is calling someone a bad name at a school board meeting. These people are incredibly weak-willed, and I think that at the end of the day, this just shows that the left is really willing to use power. They're willing to use the FBI. They're willing to use the tech companies. They're willing to use their authority to make it harder for conservatives to live their lives and speak their mind. We should take an important lesson from this, that our government is not really on our side anymore. It's really being weaponized against us. If there's a silver lining in all this, I think it's making parents realize, on the one hand, this is happening, and on the other hand, we can't continue to sit silent. People aren't actually responding well to this. They're telling the Attorney General to go to hell, which is exactly what they should tell him to do.
Here's a secretly recorded video taken in a 6th grade classroom that actually shows some of the CRT that's being taught in Franklin Woods Intermediate School.
There's the anti-racist, which is a person who works to end racism. Then there's the opposite, which is someone who is racist, who discriminates against people of a certain group. A middle group is what most people are. Most people don't actively work to end racism, and most people don't work to be in the racist group. So most people are in that middle group called an assimilationist. An assimilationist doesn't actively work to end it and doesn't work to be in the racist group.
So JD, we know that CRT is taught in schools. We have evidence of it being taught in schools in a whole lot of places across the country. Do you think the left realizes that if people know about this, they just can't win the argument with parents and with the majority of the American people, or what?
Well, I think that's exactly right. That's why they're trying to pretend it doesn't exist, is because when people realize that it exists and they realize what it is, they're punishing the left politically. And that's what the left doesn't want to do. They don't want to face political consequences for shoving this stuff down our throats. You know, I spoke to a parent of an 11-year-old girl in southwestern Ohio a couple of months ago. She came home every single day from school crying because she was learning that if you're white, you're an oppressor. If you're black, you're a victim. It was making it harder for her to build relationships in her class with the non-white kids in her schoolroom. This is exactly what this stuff does. Whatever the left tells you that critical race theory is, whatever they tell you they're doing in their schools, what they're doing is subdividing us by racial categories, making people feel bad or good based on the color of their skin. This is fundamentally evil stuff. Of course it exists in our schools. That's why there's a massive nationwide movement against it, as there should be.
Walmart has launched a critical race theory training program that denounces the United States as a white supremacist system and teaches white hourly wage workers that they are guilty of white supremacy thinking, that's a quote, and internalized racial superiority. Also a quote, this is from Chris Rufo. The formula of woke capital is clear. American executives, the most privileged people on the planet, can collect accolades and social status by pledging allegiance to DEI and telling workers they are racist oppressors. It does seem like Mr. Rufo's onto something here, JD.
He absolutely is. Look, this is one of the great distractions at the heart of critical race theory, that if you can keep the focus on identity politics, you can keep the focus on people's gender or on their race, they're not going to focus on their material best interests. You know, you don't have to pay as Walmart. Who cares if you're employing Chinese slaves? Who cares if you're benefiting from the Communist Chinese Party's slave labor? So long as you're properly woke, so long as you teach diversity, equity, and inclusion at your workplace, you won't face any scrutiny, you won't face any consequences. That's really the game that these folks are playing. They know that if they play the left-wing identity politics game, they're not going to be held to account for good wages, for good products, for good delivery of services. And I really think this is where all this goes. It's to a country that's dirty, that's broken, that's poorer, but where we're all using woke progressive lingo on racial issues. That's where this is headed. Of course, it's not a country that any of us want to live in.
JD, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Buck.
Hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops are facing discharge as the deadline to receive the COVID-19 vaccine approaches. Could the mandate jeopardize America's military preparedness? We'll ask retired Army Colonel and senior columnist at townhall.com, Kurt Schlichter, when we come back. Right now, I want to tell you about my friends at My Digital Money. Crypto, right? People make a lot of money sometimes with this. A lot of digital tokens out there. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, lots of stuff. How do you get started? How do you pick where you're going to go? That's why you need My Digital Money. It's an easy-to-use, self-trading crypto IRA platform. It's one of the few U.S.-based crypto companies that will answer your phone call and help you get started. They want you to be comfortable and feel secure when using their platform. Look, the crypto market's heating up. This could be the best time in a long time to get into this exciting technology-based investment. When it comes to your money, you deserve a team of dedicated professionals who have your back, speak to you honestly, and treat you like a human, not a number. Check them out at mydigitalmoney.com. That's mydigitalmoney.com. We'll be right back with more. Hold the line. Active military members who refuse the COVID-19 vaccine are preparing for discharge. Service members who get the boot over noncompliance run the risk of losing some veteran benefits. Here's a look at how they're taking a stand.
Due to the new order of the COVID-19 vaccine, I will potentially face separation from the United States Army, and I'm currently pending a religious exemption.
In fulfilling my duties, I have been assigned to be a lead junior sailor in our mentorship and training program, and I take great pride in doing so. I will potentially be discharged for denying the COVID-19 vaccine.
I have deployed to northern Syria and northern Iraq. In fulfilling my duties, I have been an FDC chief and an 81 section leader. I will potentially be discharged for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine.
A lot of folks served in our military facing this right now. Fighting strength of our military revolves around young, healthy people, all of whom are at extremely low risk of dying from COVID. Kurt Schlichter, senior columnist at townhall.com, joins me now to share his thoughts. Kurt is also a member of the military community. Kurt, good to have you.
Good to be here, Buck. Retired member. Want to make that clear.
Right, retired. But tell me this, my friend. When you see all these people who served, are serving, facing termination because they don't want to get a shot that they themselves clearly do not need, as a veteran, what does this make you think about the trajectory of the country and the Biden administration and all of it?
Well, look, we have an essentially unserious administration here, Buck. An administration that's throwing out good people. Remember, the only guy punished over Afghanistan is the colonel who pointed out it was a giant fiasco and called for accountability. Just this weekend, we had the Chinese fire off a hypersonic missile, and then today we had a man who's pretending to be a woman installed as a 4-star admiral in the Uniformed Public Health Service. We have General Milley out there telling us that the greatest threat to America is either whatever the hell white rage is or climate change. This is an essentially unserious military. It is a military that does not want a war in at least 20 years. It is a military that is simply not up to the challenges we're facing, paired with an administration that either doesn't care or maybe doesn't even mind that our enemies are getting us in a hammerlock. It's really disgraceful. And this throwing away good soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen, whatever the hell you call a guy in the Space Force, is just another example of this entire ridiculous trend.
James Inhofe of Oklahoma, a top Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, wants Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to suspend the Pentagon's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. He said, at a time when our adversaries continue to increase their quantitative and qualitative advantage against our forces, we should seek to ensure that no policy, even unintentionally, hinders military readiness. Most troublesome is the lack of clarity and consistency among the services as they look to implement the administration's hasty vaccination mandate. I mean, do you think there's any chance that this is going to move Secretary Austin at all?
No, of course not. No, he's going to look. This isn't about public health. This isn't about science. This is about power. And the left is committed to crushing defiance wherever it can. This is not going to change until we elect Republicans to the House and Senate who can control the purse strings. When we start cutting off the money, then perhaps they'll listen. And then finally, when we get a new president in 2024. Again, we have an essentially unserious administration. It is, it's actually quite dangerous. And the damage that they're doing to the military is very real. And it's almost, if they planned to damage the military more, Buck, I'm not sure how they would do it.
Where do you think this goes? I mean, if we have people that are going to be leaving the military over this vaccine mandate and the wokeness wave just seems to continue to wash across the military, and a lot of good people are leaving for a variety of reasons, including their opposition to this vaccine mandate. I mean, what becomes the alarm bell, so to speak, that nobody can ignore here? I mean, is it just a war with China that we're not ready for? I mean, it starts to feel pretty concerning out there, my friend Kurt.
Well, let's understand this, Buck. If we went to war with China right now, we would lose. We would lose. We would be defeated. We would lose capital ships and lots of our people. I just don't see this military being able to compete with the Chinese at this point. They could take Taiwan when they want. And now I hope I'm wrong. I've been out for a while. Maybe they got something up their sleeve. But judging from the unbroken track record of failure over the last 2 decades, I'd have to bet on the Chi-Coms, and that doesn't make me happy. There is no bottom. You've got to understand that. The destruction of the military is not a bug, it's a feature. The left doesn't like the military, except when they can use it to surround their enclaves like Capitol Hill. In the defense of America, I mean, they essentially think America is indefensible morally, so they're not really wrapped up in the idea of defending it militarily. What will happen? Yeah, some disaster, which will get blamed on everybody but the people in charge.
I just have to wonder if there's any legal recourse here at all. I mean, you're a lawyer as well as a veteran, Kurt. So is there anything that could be done for these individuals who, I would just want to know, for example, are some of them people who have natural immunity and therefore have an entirely, no matter who you are, have to recognize as legitimate objection to taking a shot that they clearly medically do not need? I mean, do you see lawsuits coming? Is there any grounds with which to fight back in the courts against this for veterans who are going to lose their roles?
Face separation.
Oh, none of that matters. Look, a leftist is going to do whatever the Biden administration wants. A conservative judge, unfortunately, will defer to the military because that's what in the past we always did, divert the executives' control of the military. So, kind of our principles are used against us. So, look, the courts aren't going to save these guys. They're going to get out, and we're going to lose good people with experience, and we are not going to get the kind of people who've been filling our military in the past. Look, I know a lot of veterans right now who sadly do not recommend that people join the military right now, because under this leadership, they're not going to be taken care of. They're going to be put in danger. They're going to be exploited. They're going to be mistreated. And that's simply the way it is. I don't see a good ending to this for a couple years minimum. Yeah. This is just, all I can say is when China sinks an aircraft carrier and kills 5,000 of our people, I hope all the people out there who voted for Joe Biden's administration are happy because they're not hearing any mean tweets.
Kurt, sobering, but appreciate you sharing the truth with us, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
The deadline for Washington State's vaccine mandate has come and gone, and a number of officers have been let go after refusing to comply. Coming up, Seattle talk show host Jason Rant stops by to tell us what the firings could mean for a city already facing a shortage of cops. But first, I want to talk to you about protecting yourself from online criminals. Did you know the Social Security Administration's computers are 45 years old? That's right. Maybe that's how cyber criminals hacked into them back in the day and stole a whole bunch of stored information. It could still happen any day. It could happen tomorrow. The threat of cyber thieves stealing your credit card information isn't your biggest risk. Your massive risk is that he takes over ownership of your home. It's called home title theft, and the FBI calls it one of the fastest growing crimes. Cyber criminals simply hack into vulnerable government, bank, or mortgage company servers where copies of your home title is stored. He forges your signature stating you sold your home to him. Then he borrows on your home and leaves you in debt. You won't know until collection notices show up. Protect your most valuable asset. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Use promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. Again, that's HometitleLock.com, promo code RADIO, HometitleLock.com. KTTH Seattle's Jason Rant is going to be with us when we come back. As the battle over vaccine mandates continues to divide the country, the men and women who serve and protect society are being forced out of their jobs. Here's what two veteran Washington State troopers had to say when signing off for the last time.
Due to my personal choice to take a moral stand for medical freedom and personal choice, I will be signing out of service for the last time today. We all know in this district, on the 19th, there will be 51 of the 75 troopers available, and only 7 of the 11 sergeants. So please, 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 take care of each other, be safe, and make sure you all go home at the end of each day.
This is my final sign-off after 22 years of serving the citizens of the state of Washington, being asked to leave because I am dirty. State 1034, this is the last time you'll hear me in a state patrol car. And Jay Inslee can kiss my ass.
Strong words. Joining me now, Jason Rantz, host of the Jason Rantz radio show in Seattle. Jason, thanks for bringing some local on-the-ground truth to us, my friend. So what's the latest? Tell us what's happening with this squaring off of police with the city government in Seattle over the vaccine mandate.
Yeah, so just breaking today, this afternoon, we learned that the mayor has officially fired or started the process to fire 6 officers. And some might think, well, that's pretty low. Only 6 officers didn't submit to this vaccine mandate. It's not an honest number. What they've actually done was an additional 103 officers who have asked for exemptions, none of which have been granted accommodations, are now being placed in what's called an extended leave. They're on the HR unavailable list. In the coming weeks, the city's going to decide whether or not they're going to simply part ways with them by relieving them of their duty, or they're going to try to walk back some of the claims that they can't accommodate. But at the end of the day, what this means is in total, 109 officers are now being taken off the force at a time where not only do we have the lowest deployable staff rate at 1,048 since the 80s, but we are seeing a rise in crime. So they're taking all of these officers off the street. They're not going to be able to do their jobs at all, which means all of us are at greater risk.
Jason, here was the mayor of Seattle, Durkin, I'm sure you know the mayor well, yesterday saying, oh, it's only 24 officers.
We have a range of contingencies. We're going to see how many. Obviously, we're down to just a couple dozen who haven't put in their paperwork. And if the trend lines are the same, many of them have already been vaccinated and just haven't put it in. But Chief Diaz feels very secure, and I have Chief Scoggins here as well, that if someone calls 911, there will not be significant impacts on the response.
Okay, so she says only 24 officers didn't turn in the vaccine paperwork. You're telling me that's not true. Is there some recognition of how bad this could get? I mean, what has the crime situation been like in Seattle for the last 18 months or so?
Well, last year we hit a 26-year high homicide rate. This year we're on pace to either match that or exceed that. So very clearly, when it's coming from a violent crime standpoint, things are trending in the wrong direction. We're also seeing that across the county, and what happens in the county is separate as far as the data as what's recorded in Seattle. And so from a county level, King County has already exceeded last year's gun homicide rate. So we're now in the historic territory. So things are clearly trending in the wrong direction. So this idea that Mayor Jenny Durkin wants us to think that all is well, that the staffing crisis is not that big of a deal. We, before today, were probably short about 400, 500, 600 officers. That's how many they need to hire. They are trying to hire as many people as humanly possible. That's how bad things are. When you call 911, the average response time for a priority 1 call, that's an emergency that's happening in the moment where it requires an officer or several to actually show up, is 8 minutes. There have been times where certain precincts have only had 3 officers on duty. And so when you get an emergency, they've had to get staff members from different precincts to go over to provide some backup, which of course then means that precinct is now short-staffed. It is a nightmare of epic proportions.
From what we understand here, Jason, Seattle's actually facing a continued exodus of police officers here. 16% of the Seattle PD members have not sent in their vaccine verification as required, right? They've also lost some 300 officers over the last 18 months. I mean, what has caused that? And obviously you told us what the crime figures are. Why are so many officers leaving? I'm sure you've heard from some of them.
Absolutely. They're leaving because they don't have any support from the city. I mean, right now there's a conversation going along because they're doing the budget for next year. And they are, again, considering significant cuts to the Seattle Police Department. There were the promises of 50%. They didn't quite hit that. They hit 20%. So now they're looking for the other 30. And that, for a lot of these officers, when you realize that 80% of the budget is personnel costs, that means they're going after the people. They're trying to go after these cops. At the same time, statewide, you've seen just a number of anti-police bills that are reimagining policing. but all it's actually doing is making it more difficult and more dangerous for cops to do their jobs. They can't use, there's no more of a standard of reasonable cause. You now have to go above and beyond in order to even make an arrest or a stop. So, or reasonable suspicion. So now we're in that territory where these cops can't quite do the job effectively anyway. And anytime they do anything, they get demonized by this council. They get called murderers. They're called racists. And it's wearing on them.
Today, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki spoke to the general possible shortage of police officers in some of these cities like Seattle because of the implementation of these vaccine mandates. And I wanted to let you hear what she had to say, Jason, and have you respond.
There are other problems in the world than COVID-19. International terror, gang violence, murder, arson, drug dealing. Is there any concern about dealing with these things?
What was the number one cause of death among police officers last year? Do you know? COVID-19. So that's something that we're working to address, and police departments are working to address. If you look at Seattle as an example, which I know has been in some of the reporting, 92% of the police force is vaccinated. Peter, more than 700,000 people have died of COVID. Again, it was the number one cause of death among police departments and police officers. It's something that we should take seriously. Departments are trying to save people in their departments, people who work for them. We support that effort.
What do you make of it?
I'm disgusted by that line. First of all, stop pretending that you suddenly care about police lives, because they've been under attack for the last 18 months almost. They've been suffering from Antifa violence and BLM radical violence, and you've said absolutely nothing. Number two, these cops are not all catching COVID on the job. In fact, when you look at actual studies that are being done, it shows that, for example, EMS providers, they're not getting COVID despite going to people who are actively sick. These people happen to be cops who get COVID. It's obviously tragic, and we don't want any of those numbers to continue to rise. But at the end of the day, it's not policing that's causing the COVID. One thing that is causing the attacks at record numbers against police officers are criminals that Joe Biden, this administration, and other Democrats are choosing to release from prison or not put them there to begin with. So let's be clear about what's causing the actual damage to these officers.
It's amazing. Jason, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look out below. Another statue will come toppling down after a New York City Commission voted to remove a Thomas Jefferson statue from the council chamber. We'll get into that coming up in Quick Hits. But right now I want to tell you one more time about my friends at My Digital Money. Seems everyone wants to invest in crypto these days. Bitcoin, Ethereum, so many digital tokens out there. It's not easy to get started. That's where My Digital Money comes in. It's an easy-to-use, self-trading crypto IRA platform with incredible customer service. It's one of the few US-based cryptocurrency companies that will answer your phone call and help you get started. Because your comfort and security is their absolute top priority, they offer an unparalleled military-grade security for your coins, trigger orders to help you secure opportunities, and a play money account so you can test the market without risking actual cash. Look, the crypto market is heating up again, and this might be the best time to get into this exciting technology-based investment. When it comes to your money, you deserve a team of dedicated professionals who have your back, speak to you honestly, and treat you like a human, not a number. Check them out at mydigitalmoney.com. That's mydigitalmoney.com. Quick Hits are up next. Stay right there. Superman is officially moving on from the American way, and one dog has the key to ending the pandemic. It is time for Quick Hits. I actually want to start with one that hits pretty close to home here because it's happening in New York City, where I currently am. You will recall that there have been moments in time in recent history when all of a sudden statues became the frontline battle in the culture war and in the rewriting of American history, and what statues stay, what goes, what gets torn down, what gets replaced. And all the while, some people, including former President Trump, were saying, how long before they start just saying that the Founding Fathers are unacceptable? We got to get rid of statues of the Founding Fathers. Well, it turns out that that was pretty prophetic. New York City has now removed a Thomas Jefferson statue from the New York City Council chamber. It's on its way out after members of the Public Design Commission agreed to take the nation's third president and well-known slave owner off his pedestal. Jefferson's statue should not be in a position of honor and recognition and tribute in the chamber, according to Councilmember Inez Barron. During a public meeting on Monday about the statue's future, she added that that Jefferson felt that blacks were, quote, inferior to whites in his own words, end quote. So they are now deciding that the founding fathers are too racist and too controversial to be in a place of honor anymore. People like Thomas Jefferson, which is exactly what many of us have been saying all along. What are the limiting principles? What is the limiting principle, if any, of the removal of some of these statues and the erasing of these titans of American history from our past? Where does that stop? I mean, how can we all have our nation's capital be Washington, D.C., if we can no longer celebrate the parts of George Washington that were incredible and bequeathed us the most amazing country in the history of the world, and still understand that there were major shortcomings and that there were aspects of the founding fathers that were immoral, were wrong. The owning of slaves, of course, is a great evil. Are we allowed to have both of those thoughts in our minds at the same time, or do we just have the destruction of our history? That's the question that we have to face now. Biden's Customs and Border Patrol nominee refuses to say the border crisis is a crisis. Here's how that went.
Mr. Magnus, I'd like to start off with a yes or no question. Do you believe we have a crisis at the southern border? Yes or no?
Senator, I'm not sure, does it really matter whether we call it a major challenge, a crisis, a big problem? Senator, I would say that my highest priority is going to...
I didn't ask your priority. I asked to characterize the situation on the border. Is there a crisis at the border? You've been nominated to serve as commissioner to the Customs and Border Patrol.
What I'm certainly trying to convey is how serious I take what's happening at the border and the amount of work that I want to put into addressing it.
Noted, noted.
Right. If it's not a big deal, then why not just say it? Yeah, of course there's a crisis. Don't play word games based on the need to not play word games. Oh, I won't say it because why does it matter what I say? Well, then why not just say it? Speak the truth. But that's not what the Biden administration wants. They want somebody who is going to carry on the propaganda for them, pretend that there's not a whole lot going on down there. Not a big deal. Superman may be the most famous comic book hero of all time. And they have changed an aspect of it because while we know Superman is all about America, the American way aspect of his motto is gone. Jim Lee, the chief creative officer and publisher of DC, announced on Saturday the Man of Steel's motto will be evolving from the well-known mantra that he fights for truth, justice, and the American way to a new mission statement, truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Oh gosh. A better tomorrow. Wow, maybe he can fight climate change for us. And a dog pulls a mask off of the owner's face when asked about the state of the pandemic. This is a video for you to check out.
Walter, what is your opinion about the current state of the pandemic? Okay, thank you.
Yes, the dog knows. The mask is dumb. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly's up next. Shields high.